of Yoga.
Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning and welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's talk consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
I'm doing great today, too. Thanks for asking. And we'd like to thank you all for tuning in. Today on The Voice of Yoga, we will talk about the confinement and limitation of the mortal mind, which sees what isn't real and is blind to the truth. In this program, we will discuss the nothingness of the good and evil world of mental energy by revealing the allness of the Divine Omnipresence. Listen as we explain why there is nothing intrinsically evil with mental material energy. However, liberation or freedom is not possible without realization of the truth. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and rest in peace. So the title of today's show is Overcoming the Vanity of Mortal Mind. What is it that you'd like to tell us about this title?
Well, I think what we want to talk about today is the limitations of this mind that we're using to try and get us through this lifetime. Like we say, we can't bring forth the divine image with the mortal mind. The title was inspired by the 127th Psalm. Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. There's nothing intrinsically evil with doing things on a mental material level, other than the simple fact you're still under the law of karma. In order for us to experience wholeness, this innate drive in all of us, we want to be whole, we want to return to that unified state, we have to transform, which literally means go through this mental material veil before we can know this truth. And so what we've been focusing on pretty consistently is the idea of initiating a process. Initiation has been around for a long time. It's just very foreign to these times today. Earlier times had points of passage and rites of passage. And today, we have none of that. People today think a hangover is a rite of passage, even though the institutions that have taken over our religions, which were the communities where they had these points of passage and rites of passage, have failed so bad. The forms that we have are empty forms. They don't do what they were intended to do, which was initiate a process in development where we went from one level of consciousness that was low to a higher level of consciousness until eventually we experienced total consciousness or this experience of wholeness.
So let's explain more about the confinement and limitation of the mortal mind. And then we said, which sees what isn't real. Explain to us what we mean by confinement. That's such an interesting word to use, especially coupled with mortal mind.
Well, see, the entire mental material world is in half. It's a restricted view of what's really here. From that perspective, you're not seeing the full picture. And the more you analyze it and understand how it really is working, what we're looking at with mortal mind is a mental image about the divine creation. It's such an interesting dynamic when you begin to unbox it. This entire human experience is a belief. Like we say, fear is a defense mechanism for the false sense of self. Why? Because if we don't believe we are a finite mortal being, and we don't believe there is life and death, then this entire human experience dissolves in the light of the realization life is perfect, whole, complete. Nothing ever needs to be added to it or taken away. So the more we examine this and unbox it, you start to see life is just a simple mind game. There are levels of consciousness and degrees of awareness. We as human beings have the privilege to experience, but there are things we need to do in order to unlock this hidden potential.
And then the second part of that statement, the mortal mind is blind to the truth. It sounded like you were just explaining what that was and revealing the allness of the divine omnipresence.
Yeah, and then of course we have to take this from a theoretical level to the actual experience. We learned this mind we're using can't bring forth the divine image, but as the Bible told us, repent meant think differently, or what we learned in yoga. We could think in other modes of thinking. Once you start to understand the complexity of this human experience and you start to familiarize yourself with these modes of thinking, say, for example, the lower mind, which is directly related to our corporeal senses, can only do one thing at a time. Now, once we start to advance from instinct, appetite, preservation, and survival to human intelligence, and we develop the mental faculties, we start to access a part of the mind that now can do many things at once. From this human level of consciousness, we can graduate to even a further mortal sense, which is the collective consciousness, able to access these parts of the mind that are doing more than one thing at a time, like what's controlling your heart rate, your blood pressure, your body temperature simultaneously. But then there is divine mind. Divine mind is doing everything at once. And you can't comprehend this with the mortal mind because it doesn't have the capacity. It's limited. So we initiate this process where we learn how to stop thinking and we make this avenue of awareness conscious of the activity of the divine mind, this mind that is doing everything at once. And so stop thinking, but you let the Lord build the house. You let divine mind do its thinking in your awareness. You don't make divine mind, but we have to get out of this false sense of existence. And in order to do that, you have to be able to control it and master it.
And what's interesting that we said in the beginning, there's nothing intrinsically evil with mental material energy. So we're saying it's not a bad thing. It's just not going to get us where we need to be for spiritual development.
Well, even the term evil is an interesting term because it's an archery term. Sin is an archery term. Sin means missing the mark. Evil in archery is anything that isn't the mark. We get away from this good and bad concept. Orthodox religion has brainwashed us into using it as our paradigm or our template. We want to start to graduate from good and bad to real and unreal, which is maybe a more accurate way of distinguishing mental material from spiritual. Spiritual is invisible and intangible to corporeal sense. So we can't use the mortal mind. Like I was saying, we have to develop the faculty that enables us to perceive spiritual reality, spiritual sense. And this is, again, a process where we first learn how to control how we think, to stop thinking. We also have to graduate from the confinement of thinking life is in matter. And to substantiate that, I have something here from Gilbert Carpenter, Notes on Divinity, March 15th, 1907. And I'll read it. We must be resurrected from the dead, dead in trespasses and sin. The belief of life in the body, of matter, of life, substance, and intelligence in matter, the proclivities of the parents manifested through a belief in heredity, etc. We must be resurrected from all this. For what does Paul say? Except ye have part in the resurrection, my preaching is vain. End of quote. Today, we want to look at these words, vain and vanity, from the perspective of the divine self, not the mortal sense of self. What is the advantage of having an immortal twin? The mystical idea of a dream come true. What happens when humans awake from the false belief in mortality and realize, I am the image and likeness of the immortal self. I am the one life.
Swami, you had said the phrase immortal twin, having an advantage of that. Can we dive a little bit deeper on that phrase, immortal twin?
Yeah, our identity definitely has to shift, graduate from the belief in form. And a good way to do this is to start with an astral mental image of a larger sense of self. We use the man, the bull, the lion, and the eagle, which you can find in Revelations. When you put the fixed signs of the zodiac on the angles, it sets up the zodiac in a way that gives you an image that includes the 7 personal planets that would be associated with the 7 chakras in yoga or the 7 churches in Revelation. The similarity between a chakra and a church is church means Lord's house. House in the Bible means consciousness. So a chakra or the church is that place where human thought meets the divine consciousness. And so when you have this larger sense of self, something you rise into, you graduate from thinking you're a finite mortal being on the planet into the heavens. 7 personal planets, 12 signs of the zodiac. And the other thing is you graduate from the many to the one. When Mary Baker Eddy says, we are a reflection of the divine. If you have the mental landscape that will support this, and you understand what is a reflection, spirit reflects, mental material absorbs. Even the analysis of a reflection, when you look at an image in a mirror, you know there's no life, truth, intelligence, or substance in that reflection. The same is true the relationship between the immortal twin and the individual on the planet. Only we have to have this turning, graduate from awareness being in the individual on the planet to the immortal self. And again, this is something you learn how to develop and practice on a regular basis until eventually it becomes your preferred mode of operation.
We're going to pause right here to hear a word from our sponsor. Listeners will be back with you in just a few moments. Kriya Yoga Theory 1, Human Development and 8 Essential Stages of Kriya Yoga. This program is a comprehensive course that will help you get your arms around the science of Kriya Yoga. It provides a clear understanding of the goals and objectives behind yoga, along with the physics of spirituality. It includes the practices, supportive concepts of Kriya Yoga, and the process in human development, apotheosis, the process of the human becoming divine. a complete guide on how to become a human in the adult state. Get the light in your soul and experience the simplicity and joy of union with the divine. This course is available in live classes at the ashram or online with 8 videos or 4 CDs. Visit our website, www.ipdtransform.com, for more information. Welcome back. For those just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. Swami, you posed a question earlier, and I'd like to repeat that question, have us talk more about it. What happens when the human awakes from the false belief in mortality and realizes, I am the image and likeness of the immortal self. I am the one life. Your thoughts?
Well, you would transcend the limitations of this limited perspective of who you think you are. You would also be what we would call enlightened. You would now know the truth. The truth being what we're calling life, this mental material concept, isn't real. Life is hid with Christ in God. Life is eternal, perfect, changeless, everywhere, always. So you would walk in the kingdom of heaven on earth. You would have a completely different perspective because you would now be under the protection of divine law, no longer be under the limitations of karmic law. This struggle we all go through between good and evil. And you would see everything from this broader sense of life, resting in the knowledge whatever appears in your corporeal sense is merely cosmic TV. There's nothing real about it. And it would bring the peace that comes with knowing. All of the things we are concerned about on a mortal human sense of life loses all of its urgency, its reality.
So let's describe more about what we mean about the vanity of the mortal mind.
In this context, vain and vanity are more associated with the concept of wasting time, futile effort, and impossibility. There isn't anything evil in the mortal sense of the word to doing things from the level of personal sense, but it has limitations. Whatever we do on a human personal level is done under the law of karma, under material law, which means for every action there is an equal and an opposite reaction. So like Mary Baker Eddy says, it's a halfway measure. And mathematically, if your goal is to go from point A to point B, and you can only go 1/2 the distance with each move, you become rapidly close, infinitely close, and then frustrated as all get out because you're never going to make it to point B. You can never find a number you can't multiply by 0.5. And so we learn with thought and belief, we can change finite bad to finite good. But in this model, it misses the mark of liberation or freedom from the belief in mortality, from karmic law. And to help us grasp this notion of the possibility of immortal life, we have something here from Mary Baker Eddy, Science and Health, page 13, lines 6 to 32.
And I'll read it. If we are not secretly yearning and openly striving for the accomplishment of all we ask, our prayers are vain repetitions, such as the heathens use. If our petitions are sincere, we labor for what we ask, and our Father, who seeth in secret, will reward us openly. Can the mere public expression of our desires increase them? Do we gain the omnipotent ear sooner by words than by thoughts? Even if prayer is sincere, God knows our need before we tell Him or our fellow beings about it. If we cherish the desire honestly and silently and humbly, God will bless it, and we shall incur less risk of overwhelming our real wishes with a torrent of words. If we pray to God as a corporeal person, this will prevent us from relinquishing the human doubts and fears which attend such a belief, and so we cannot grasp the wonders wrought by infinite and corporeal love, to whom all things are possible. Because of human ignorance of the divine principle, love, the Father of all, is represented as a corporeal creator. Hence, men recognize themselves as merely physical and are ignorant of man as God's image or reflection and of man's eternal and corporeal existence. The world of error is ignorant of the world of truth, blind to the reality of man's existence. For the world of sensation is not cognizant of life and soul, not in body. End of the quote.
One of the things Mary Baker Eddy says is you can't put an infinite mind in a finite form. And so this idea of absent from the body and present with the Lord becomes an important thing we have to put together. How to separate identity from the confinement and limitation of the mortal sense of existence. And the connection is found in the thought unity between the real man and the divine mind. So there is this whole mental landscape we have to build, and what Mary Baker Eddy said, educate thought up to spiritual apprehension. Spirit is found before thought and above corporeal sense. And in Kriya Yoga, we work with the 8 stages. We use the term meditation. Meditation, by definition, is the 7th stage of yoga. The 5th stage of yoga is pratyahara, sense withdrawal. So we enlist strategies to empower ourselves so we can separate our identity from the influence of the 5 corporeal senses. And at the same time, yoga meaning union, we internalize the invisible, intangible, divine omnipresence as our new symbol for validation in the physical form. This is what was called born of spirit. Now have the benefit of internal support, and we also have the benefit of initiation. Matter and mind came together with new information. We're no longer drawing from fear and limitation. We are now drawing from truth and wholeness, a more reliable resource, more dependable. And this is what brings the peace that passes understanding.
Swami, like vanity, would temptation also be an aspect of the mortal mind?
Yeah, I think the mortal mind is constantly seeking our attention because it needs our belief in it. The real vanity of the mortal mind is it sees what isn't there and is blind to what is here, the divine creation of perfect life. Learning to understand why I want always obscures I am. The idea of accepting spiritual identity isn't just a concept or a belief, but a law. Spirit is a demonstrable principle, and it testifies with deeds, not merely words. The value of spiritual acceptance, spiritual identity, is we graduate from being under the law of karma, and we are now under the protection of divine law, which has no sickness, suffering, disease, lack, or limitation. It's definitely an upgrade for us to overcome the vanity of the mortal mind. When we do that, we lose a personal sense of self, but we do not lose self-awareness. It's not a loss of conscious awareness. It is an expansion. It is a more inclusive sense of self, where now you can see the false in the context of the real. It's like using a mirror. When you look at yourself in the mirror, you can see maybe my face is dirty. Now, once you understand that, you can use the mirror. But the problem would happen is if you saw your reflection in the mirror and you said your face was dirty and you started washing the mirror instead of washing your face. This is where it starts to fall apart for humanity. We think the reflection is real, and so we react to the reflection rather than disengage the activity which is causing the reflection and let the Lord build the house. Give ourselves this half a turn. Shift your awareness from the form to the life. And then by filling your thought with the invisible, intangible, divine omnipresence, in that silence and stillness, you let divine mind do its thinking in your awareness. And then you start to see when the Lord builds the house, it's perfect. If I were to do the same thing with thought and belief, it would be imperfect. And it would be under the law of karma.
So we have another passage here from Mary Baker Eddy from her Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures. And I'll read it. If action proceeds from the divine mind, action is harmonious. If it comes from erring mortal mind, it is discordant and ends in sin, sickness, and death. Those two opposite sources never mingle in fount or stream. The perfect mind sends forth perfection, for God is mind. Imperfect mortal mind sends forth its own resemblances, of which the wise man said, all is vanity. Nature voices natural, spiritual law and divine love, but human belief misinterprets nature. Arctic regions, sunny tropics, giant hills, winged winds, mighty billows, verdant vales, festive flowers, and glorious heavens all point to mind, the spiritual intelligence they reflect. The floral apostles are hieroglyphs of deity. Suns and planets teach grand lessons. The stars make night beautiful, and the leaflet turns naturally towards the light. These from Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, pages 239, 2532, page 240, 1 to 10.
It's very important to start to use the testimony of your senses as the check engine light on the dashboard of consciousness. I really like what she said here. Suns and planets teach great lessons. A great way to use astrology is to substantiate the logic, the order, the predictability of the divine mind. You never hear in a report the new moon is going to be 2 hours late, or there won't be any new moon this month. They're always exactly where and when they are supposed to be. This is a great indicator of the perfection of the divine mind. Now what we want to start to do is learn how to attune ourselves to that and turn away from the testimony of the corporeal senses and let divine mind take over the scientific government of our body.
Swami, thank you for your insights of today's program, Overcoming the Vanity of Mortal Mind. Listeners, be sure to visit the website www.ipdtransform.com. On any pages you can scroll down, you'll see several buttons there that you could press that would further your understanding. And Swami, any final thoughts about today's podcast?
Well, I would like to encourage people to join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance, get the light in your soul, and rest in peace. Namaste.
Thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton, along with Swami Jayananda, signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga realization. Namaste.